Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are a year-round talk series bringing you the best creative voices across entertainment, and I'm so thrilled today to be joined by the fantastic Anupam Kher to talk all about his latest podcast series, Anupam Cares. And one of the things I was really curious about is, you've put together all of these really, really fantastic episodes, and you're recounting all of these stories from your life. You're diving into stories around the world, and I was just really fascinated in what that process looked like when you first came up with the concept in looking back at your life, thinking about some of the stories that you wanted to tell, that you wanted to share, and then just curating it down and figuring out what really worked for an episode and a story that you wanted to share.
Thank you, Mara. Thank you for inviting me on this platform. I'm very happy and I feel privileged to be part of this conversation. I come from a small town called Shimla, which is up north at the foothills of Himalayas. And I was born in a very poor family. We have different names for poor families. These we call them lower middle class, lower middle class. But at that time, it was poor, middle class, and rich. And and somehow I always was witness to my own life and more to my failures and my disasters, because to laugh at them made me feel better about my surroundings, my conditions, and all those things. And it became a habit. And over a period of time, one started narrating one's incidents that this went wrong. And slowly, when I, over a period of time, when I became successful, those stories became my stepping stones. Those stories became my reference point of strength. So when this idea of podcast came, I felt that I must tell stories from my life, which at that time when they were happening, those incidents were happening, they were painful, they were not so great, but over a period of time, they again became something which when I look back, gave me a sense of strength. So I always had this thought, and I spoke to my producers at the iHeartRadio that I want to do stories which will make people feel inspired, which will motivate people, which will tell them that failure is an event, never a person. We are too scared of failure. We are too scared of being compared to people who are more successful. And we are constantly unhappy with who we are. You can feel very unhappy by reflecting to somebody who is doing better than you, but you never know as a person, you can be wonderfully happy. uh, you said there is snowstorm, but I don't see any reflection of that snowstorm on your face, because this is what we are enjoying to talk about each other's lives. In this case, my life. So I certainly knew that I will do something with reference to my life, because my autobiography, which is Lessons Life Taught Me Unknowingly, was just published a few months before I came up with the idea of this podcast. And then my producers came with amazing stories of people all over the world with so much of joy and positivity, that I thought, in this time of COVID, in this time of lockdown, in this time of darkness, we can warm people's hearts and make them feel that, oh, it's this world is worth living also. So that was the basic idea. And that is how, and also I thought it was an interesting name called Anupam Cares. It rhymed with Anupam Kher. And yes, so that was the basic idea.
And in terms of working within the medium of podcasting and using radio as a format, you've talked a little bit about how you did some work with a local radio station of yours several years ago, and things didn't go very well on the first day. And so you've kind of avoided that as a medium for several years. So what was that journey like in revisiting a medium that you'd been into once, things had gone a little bit wrong, and just really pushing through into a space that maybe felt a little bit uncomfortable at first for you?
Mara, you are being kind when saying things went a little bit wrong. No, I was thrown out of my job, my first job on the first day. After I graduated in arts, I got this job as a radio announcer, which was a temporary job. And on my first day, I woke up everybody. It was at 6:30 in the morning. I was to do this job from 6:30 to 9:30, and I said, "You please get." And it was like snowstorm, like there is right now in New York, in Shimla, there was a snowstorm. People had to wake up. I just told them, "Listen to my first announcement." At about 7 o'clock, I was supposed to say, "Now today's highlights are these following programs," and my it was live, and my duty officer said to me that, look, if there is anything wrong, just play this music. Just play this. I'm glad you have art of without looking there. You are putting the glass, water in the glass itself. That's amazing. You've practiced it. Oh, there's something. So, and I fumbled so badly on this name. We have a very famous musician called Shiv Kumar Sharma, and I just could not complete his name. I said Shiv Kumar Shuk 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 instead of putting that loop music. And this duty officer came, and that was my last job. So it hurt me very badly. It hurt my pride, and I decided I will never do radio. I did do some plays. Similarly, in fact, once I was running in my school, and my PT teacher saw me and said, "Even if you run alone, you will come second." So, so that stopped me from being an athlete. And in studies, I never got more than 38% marks. But so this was my kind of a revenge with the All India Radio in Shimla branch, that look, I can do a podcast, I can do a radio program, I can do something like that. No, but um, I think sometimes you do things which when you want to sort of make yourself feel better first. But because there was a story, it's a good story to narrate. That my first job as a radio jockey or a radio announcer was a complete disaster. But I'm glad that I could finish that all these episodes that I did finish called Anupam Cares. Yeah.
One of the things that I love about the way that you've put this podcast together is you really strip storytelling down to kind of like the fundamental intrinsic nature in the way that, you know, we grow up as a human race telling stories. We've been doing it since the beginning of time. And the way that you tell them just, you know, kind of like almost took me back to childhood in the way that, you know, you're doing some of the voices, you know, there's like little sound effects that come in specific moments, but they're only there when you really need them for effect. Was that a really conscious decision of just wanting to make it very basic, very straightforward, one person narration storytelling in that way that just strips it down?
Absolutely. You are bang on when you say childhood stories. My reference point was my grandmother telling us same story again and again. She basically used to tell us the story of King Lear, and she just used to name the change of the king, name the change the name of the king sometimes. Sometimes the name of the daughters will be different, but and she used to tell us the stories with so much of sound effect. And she will tell us horror stories where she will say, and the door of this old building opened, and the wind was blowing, and the dogs were barking far away. So she used to tell us, and it was fascinating for her. I lived in a joint family, so we had about 5, 6 children together, and she used to tell the stories with so much of dramatization. She was not an actress; she was just grandmother. So and that was fascinating. I think all the stories which, if they told with the original joy of telling them, then it's much more, because sound effects, if you put outside, they are sound effects. They are they don't really are a basic um, sense of storytelling. So it was a very conscious effort that I will tell these stories as my grandmother used to narrate it to us. And I was very lucky to have my producers who were very enthusiastic about it. They used to tell me, now can you make this sound, can you do this, can you do even with your footstep, tap 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 tap. So because even cinema is basically storytelling. It's not about how much money do you spend. At the end of it, what works is story. And all these stories, that's why also first 2 3 days I did rehearsals. I tried to sort of make it, I thought um, bass voice, a deep voice will be what will work, because actors are basically too impressed with themselves. So actors want to make their sound, make their voice feel very brass and very bass. But when I heard back, I did not like what I was doing. So that's why the voice that I have used is very normal voice, and this happened and then that happened, and then this is what the storytelling was all about. But my whole point was to bring back the childhood memories of my grandmother telling us stories. And that's what so it did not have any outside factors. Of course, there were some sound effects and some music that was used, but not in the main narration. because I remember those till today. I remember those stories of my grandmother. She was the only thing my grandmother used to do completely strangely was to tell us a lullaby. And that lullaby used to be the most monotonous lullaby on earth. So monotonous that she used to go off to sleep herself while singing that lullaby. She will go on. I'll just give you a rough example. It was in Kashmiri. My mother tongue is, I'm from Kashmir, so she will go like this. Chinese, Chinese, bye. And we'll all children wait for her to go to sleep while singing a lullaby for us. So to be honest, Anupam Cares is basically reliving my childhood memories. Most of the stories are from my childhood, and somehow when you live in a small town, the stories are so amazing. I remember stories of Maxim Gorky, Lorca, um, Roald Dahl. These stories are so similar to our stories. Yeah.
And you were just mentioning the tone of voice that you had and kind of not going for that like deep, soulful, booming tone. And you really have such a relaxing and soothing tone of voices as you're giving your delivery and your narration. And you've clearly thought very specifically about the pacing of these stories as well. You know, there's moments where you pause and just allow us to sit and take it in for a moment when the story necessitates that. Was that something where you would sit at home and kind of run through these stories yourself and figure out what the pacing and what the dynamic and what the tone was going to be? Or was it something that you really just found instinctively when you were in the recording booth taping these?
So I don't think in English. I think in my mother tongue, which is Hindi. So for me to make sense of what I'm telling as a story, the story has to make sense to me first. Means I was reading them first. Of most of the stories I was reading. Then I was talking extempore. I did lot of 2-3 recordings before I sort of heard them. And when I heard them, and I thought to myself in initial 2-3 stories, I said, if don't want to listen to it, why will people want to listen to them? So I tried to make it as natural. Somewhere I changed words. I could not pronounce certain words properly. I did not. The idea was not to impress. You see, sometimes you get these apps where they tell you how to sleep. You know, now put your eyes and breathe. The narrators are so impressed with their own voice that my mind goes into the monotony of how they are going about it. And maybe, but I wanted it to be as natural, as simple, as uh, full of faults also sometimes. It's all right because that is what makes it. A perfect thing does not make perfect sense. It's the imperfection in your performance, in your storytelling, that makes it much more believable. So I did not want it to be a perfect narration. I wanted it to have its flaws, its weaknesses, and yet the intention was supposed to be a very genuine and very very earnest. My intention of telling a story was earnest. Maybe that's why I picked up stories from my own life, because my grandfather used to say, when you're telling the truth, you don't have to remember it. So these were the stories which I had already always mentioned. So that was the quality of sound. The quality needed to be sincere rather than anything else.
And you were mentioning earlier the producers and the story editors that were working on this series with you. How much of a hand did they have in shaping the way that you were going to tell the story, helping you just figure out, okay, that story feels like a really good fit, but maybe we need to pare down this section a little bit so that it kind of like flows a little bit differently? Kind of how much of a hand did they have in any of that?
They are the owners of this. I must give them complete credit. They were brilliant. Mangesh, Julian, they were amazing. Their idea, because I surrendered myself to them. I did not want to go there as a thespian, as a person who has done 517 films. I knew that they know what they want. So the whole credit goes completely to them. We had a dream team to work with. Um, and they were so open to my suggestions. They were so, and also, besides being technicians on the show, they were wonderful people. So because these are the stories which needs to move the people who are working with you. If they are not having an impact on the stories, on the people who are working with you, then that means it will not work on the people or listeners. So all of three of them, Morgan and Julian and Mangesh, they are wonderful people, and the stories about wonderful people, stories about aspirational people, stories about people who have a heart. And because we were also doing in this time of pandemic, we needed to draw strength from each other, and they gave me a huge amount of strength. I owe everything to them.
And the way that you construct all of these episodes, they really flow into each other, and the stories that you tell build on what you've shared with us in episodes previously. What was that journey of not just figuring out the stories that you were going to tell, but how they were going to tessellate and really fit together? You know, if we put this story early on in the season, it's going to give this sort of meaning, but actually if we put it here, it's going to have a different impact because some of the other stories that I've told or characters from my life that I've shared. So what was that process of just figuring out how they all came together collectively with an overall narrative thread?
So I think most of the job was done by the producers, but they did ask me, "What do you think?" I just certainly wanted my father's story, which is live life, at the end of it, because I wanted that to be a finale. Um, and also, as I was progressing from my first play to my first romance to my first failure later on, I think that was the, so that people will also uh, a huge amount of audiences in US know me from certain amount of movies that I have done, but none of them knew me as a person. Means I'm not as known over there as I'm known in India, because people have seen me in movies for the last 36 years. So I certainly wanted them to relate to the stories first, then to the person.
Yeah.
It's like if Mr. De Niro narrates a story, the world will know about it, and then you will know constantly that it's Mr. De Niro. Or Laurence Olivier was supposed to say something like that. You knew about it. If I was to tell stories over here in India, not that I'm comparing myself with these two greats, but they will know that this is my voice and this is what I'm telling the story. The benefit that I had, that people largely did not know my voice, so they got more engrossed in the stories rather than the voice, and that was what was important, I think, in these stories. But yes, I did want my father's story, and there were certain times when I used to get very moved, especially in my father's story. I cried like a baby while I was recording it, because I remembered my father, how we went about it and how what it was done, and we had to stop the recording twice. It was not that, it was just I was moved by the sincerity my father had. So I think that was the structure of the stories that we created. Also, because I was telling stories of other people also, it was important to sort of juxtapose these two stories together.
And you've also mentioned that you had a little bit of apprehension about what the feedback and what the response was going to be when you first started recording this. And you had the luxury of recording the first few episodes, all together before anything was released. Did you allow yourself to then look at it and think about it and kind of look at what the feedback and the response was to feed into the rest of the recordings that you were doing, or did you just keep that completely separate to your mind?
So it's very strange that I did two episodes in New York before I came to Mumbai, because in March, after the pandemic was announced, I came to here, and the rest of the episodes I recorded in the studio over here, and my team was working there. And I was simultaneously working on this book that I was writing. And there was a chapter in the book I was writing about, it does not matter what people think, you must do what gives you joy. And that was when I was writing that chapter, and that was the day I think I was recording episode 8 or episode 9. And I suddenly thought, why is it important to me that I should do it in a certain manner? I should do that. I am enjoying this process, even if it does not do well, even if nobody listens to it, or 10 people listen to it instead of 10,000 people. If I make a difference in 1%, that is what the achievement of this whole exercise will be. And so it liberated me of the worry or the fear that how is it going to be received. I think we constantly worry about that, what other people are going to think. But if we are doing anything with sincerity and putting in a little hard work, then it doesn't matter, because your effort is as truthful as you can be about it. And it's like food. if it does not have the basic nature of it being tasty, then whatever you put on it, salt and chilies or something like that, that is going to not give you as much joy as what the basic taste of the food is. So basic, I was happy that I was picking up stories which had the truth in them. My season two, if we get one season two, that will be a little difficult, because then it will be, I'll have to recreate the same sincerity and magic what I have managed to do to whatever extent in the first season.
And your book that you just mentioned, Your Best Day is Today, I was really interested in the fact that you tend to write your books by speaking into a dictaphone. And once I heard that, it really makes sense with the voice that you have in those books. It really feels like you're speaking to an audience through the pages. Was that something where the very first time that you sat down and started writing a book, that was just the method that you found easiest that you were drawn to? Or was it something where you tried different methods and different ways of writing for yourself and then landed upon that?
So basically, I'm not a professional writer. I'm maybe as an actor, or I'm maybe a podcast host or something, but writer, I'm not. As I said to you, I think in Hindi, I never got more than 38% marks in my studies ever. So, but I have a lot to say when I say from my own experience. I have a philosophy that my first book is called Your the Best Thing About You Is You, which was a series of articles that I wrote called Change Within, because I discovered that world tries to make you feel smaller by telling you that somebody else is doing better than you, that somebody else is better actor than you, somebody is a more popular actor than you, somebody has more Instagram followers, somebody has more likes, etc., etc., and you tend to feel demoralized about it. So where do you find your strength from? So I started talking in a dictaphone about what is it that one should work on. And that was a series of articles, and strangely, I had a publisher who printed, and within 2 months that book became number one bestseller. And I said, what was the whole, why did it become? Because I'm not quoting Jean-Paul Sartre in it, I'm not quoting Lorca or all these great philosophers or something, but I think the simplicity of narration, I think you pointed out very well, because I was talking into it and then I was transcribing them on a piece of paper and then sort of correcting it, made me work on the books. My second book was Lessons Life Taught Me Unknowingly, which was my autobiography. This is the book I was not going to write, because my earlier book, second book, had come just last year. But when I came here on the 20th of March from New York, the way I saw Mumbai, I had never seen in the last 39 years that I've been here. You see, when you see a similar kind of situation in New York, you think you're in a foreign country, maybe you're in your own country, people will be different. But this pandemic was so strongly had affected everybody, that I had never seen streets of Mumbai so deserted. My own son opened this much of door. He was seeing me after 6 months, and he took out his elbow and he gave me an elbow bump, and he said, "Dad, please quarantine yourself for 14 days." My wife, who's a member of parliament, she was in another city. So I was alone first time, and I've never taken an off. In 36 years that I have been in movies, I have never taken an off. And here I was for 2 months doing nothing, sitting. So, and it gave me a sense of fear of the unknown. I thought I was a character. I was Will Smith in I Am Legend. That, that nobody's around, and I'm talking to myself. And I actually started talking to myself. I started talking to the birds. The cuckoo was cooing, and I was replying to her. And as an actor, when I'm fearful of something, as an actor, that, oh my God, these are very difficult lines, and this is a difficult scene, I start recording it. So that's how I started recording my sense of fear. And then God gave me screenplay days after the other. Days after, my mother got COVID, my brother got COVID, my sister-in-law got COVID. So I had to write about that, how as a person who is affected by it, I'm thinking. Then people who were very close to me, some of them died. Then suddenly there was deaths happening all over the world, and death became a statistics rather than a tragic situation. So I just spoke about it. I will get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, because a thought will come and I'll speak in it, and I'll give it to an assistant. He will transcribe it. So when I hear that tape now, it has such a such an amazing quality of being alive that I was thinking of that I must release these tapes as an audio thing where people are this is not exactly what I have written in a book, but they give you a sense of what I'm talking about. That's how the book came up. Yeah.
And in the book, you talk about the fact that you were on set at the time when COVID hit in. You were living in New York, filming New Amsterdam, and I was interested in the narrative and the storyline that you were filming shortly before production closed down, because you talk about filming an episode where, your character, who's a doctor who's always there caring for everybody else, suddenly became infected. And as an actor, how did that cause you to take this character that you'd constructed, that you'd played over so many episodes, and to suddenly think about him in such a different light and the different aspects of who he was as a person, and the different way that you wanted to show that side of him?
So when the episode came and we started shooting our episode, it was not the COVID was not announced. It was so amazing that the writers had imagined it, or sort of they just wrote it as a pandemic or something like that, that it has happened. So I was just acting it out that Dr. Kapoor has got this situation into it. And we finished that shoot. It was episode 18th, and we were shooting for episode 19th when we started hearing these murmurs that this is something which is happening on a world level. Uh, then to think about it, oh my God, this was what had happened to Dr. Kapoor in the episode was very strange. But it was when I went to Newark Airport, when I finally decided, when the production closed down and I decided to come back. Usually, when you are traveling with Air India Airlines, you meet millions of Indians who are traveling, and they will take at least 20 pictures with you, selfies, etc., etc. And it was happening and I love being taken with pictures being taken of mine. I think it's fantastic. And I saw people were not taking pictures, not only because uh, there was mask or something like that, but they were too eager to go back to India. So this whole fact that's why I think though they did not show the episode 18th, because there's a sensitivity towards people. But I when we were shooting the last few days, we started noticing that there was a fear in people's eyes. There was an inherent fear, and everybody wanted to go to their own places. That's why I said in the book also, I said that we discovered that we run after lots of things without any reason, whereas we only need three things in life. We need to go back to our closed ones, family, husband, wife, children. Number two, we need essential commodities, food, shelter, etc. Third is Wi-Fi should be working. We don't need anything else at all. So this was a learning that I got through during this period of. I'm an eternal optimist, Mara. To me, the ultimate definition of optimism is nothing is all wrong. Even a clock that has stopped running is correct twice a day. So I had to find something optimistic in this lockdown period. Means to be staying at home for 9 months is a big, uh, and not voluntarily, because the world is telling you that you need to stay back at home. So that was a thing. And but yet we discovered that we can connect with each other. We called up our old friends. We discovered our hobbies. We had time with our own self. We did meditation with our own self. Means we came closer to ourselves. I personally feel. Yeah.
And to the point that you were making earlier about how you really haven't taken a day off in so long, I mean, you've got 432 screen credits, which is astronomical, and you've been working nonstop for years. What do you find is the thing that still challenges you the most, that you're still learning from every single time you walk onto a new set or take on a new character or a new project?
First of all, IMDb has missed out on 80 more films. I have done. I'm on my 518th film. So I'm just joking, but yes, I am on my 518th film. I think I love life. My father, when he was dying, 20 minutes before that, he whispered in my ears. He said to me, he was too weak to say anything, and he said, This is the final episode also of my podcast." And he said to me, "Live life," and I actually lived. I actually lived life. I was a trained actor before I came to the city, Mumbai, and first 3 years were terrible. I have slept on the railway platforms. When I got work, I told God, I will never stop working. I am a people oriented person. I love people. I think there is so much to learn from them. There is so much. We are all vulnerable people. We all have our own insecurities, which we hide. And I like to go beyond what we present, what we project. And so every day to be able to go to work is a great. Every time I open my eye and I say, oh, I'm alive today also. So there's another beautiful day to live. As I said to you, there is no end to complaining. There is no end to greed. There is no end to thinking, oh my God, I could have done so many things in life. But I'm very happy to, I'm a son of a forest department clerk's son, small son, in a small city. And look at him. I'm talking to somebody who is in New York, and I'm talking about a career which has gone there for 36 years with 518 films. How fortunate I am. Now, if I say that, why am I not Brad Pitt and feel upset about it? That's such a silly thing to do. So for me, every, the greatest joy of being an actor is that you learn to play so many people. So that means you are richer in emotions. And if on top of it, you are not scared of failure and you're optimistic, it's a lethal combination. To be, when Jess told me I have to speak to you, now I don't know you, but the idea of meeting and talking to somebody else is so enriching and so much to learn. Whether it's your infectious smile, whether it is you're genuinely asking me about these questions about it because you want to communicate. The virtual communication has made us a little more outgoing to reach out to the other person because we can't see the person physically. So my desire is to communicate with you more than if we were sitting maybe together, because we would have then been distracted by how is the weather outside, who is that person, what kind of clothes is he wearing, and what is he doing. But right now it's one to one. So to me, to go out and every day on a new set is to know so many new people, whether it's a spot boy, whether it's a light boy, whether it's a makeup girl, whether it's a costume person. You are touching so many people's lives and you are learning so much about so many other people. And uh, uh, also the joy of seeing your work. A lot of people do not get to see what they are doing. Our work is being recorded. So when I see my fourth film, I cringe. It's like watching black and white pictures of your childhood. But at least you see the growth. You see, so I don't take myself seriously. You see, people who pretend don't like themselves. I somehow like myself from where I've come and what I've done. So it's a great feeling, and I'm not very harsh on myself. I'm not saying that I'm pompous or I'm too involved with myself, but I'm kind to myself. It's because I'm kind to myself I can be kind to others.
Well, this has been such an absolute delight and pleasure. And your podcast is really just exactly what we all need right now. So thank you so much for taking time to share and talk about all of this.
Thank you so much for being so wonderful. Thank you so much. I really enjoy talking to you. And keep yourself safe and hope your family is fine. Give my love to everybody and all the best. Thank you so much.